Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for being here. I've been told that with this microphone I have a very good chance to be electrocuted live. So if you want to stream this, could be you could go viral. So feel free to.
Feel the lightning.
Lightning conferences. That was too literal. Too literal. Anyway, I should be fine if I keep it like this. If I stop talking, you know why. The topic of this presentation is about the Lightning Network and privacy in general. People tend to be a little bit confused about the intergoing relationship between the Lightning Network project and technology and protocol and privacy features on Bitcoin in general. There seem to be very strong opinions on both sides. Somebody praised Lightning as a panacea for privacy since the very beginning of the first white paper, and somebody is claiming that Lightning is a privacy nightmare. We can see some example, of course, from the only reliable source of truth, which is, of course, Bitcoin Twitter. And there are a lot of examples I could give you. I'm just choosing a few ones. This one is the official account of the Electrum wallet, a very respected, super old and glorious wallet. And he's basically claiming that you can just avoid CoinJoin as a privacy tool because you can use Lightning opening a channel and then swapping out with a sovereign swap instead of CoinJoining as a way to decorrelate on-chain UTXOs. So he's saying, well, Lightning solves privacy basically instead of CoinJoin. And there are other people, since I was lazy yesterday night when I did the presentation, I just collected a very recent case of zero-fee routing, which is basically proposing, actually also doing, is using Lightning as a mixer to get some of the funds blacklisted by the Canadian government. So he's claiming that his Lightning node is actually working as a huge mixer, and he claims that moving coins to Lightning and closing back out to on-chain gives you better on-chain privacy than Wasabi or Whirlpool, because the UTXOs are completely disconnected. You know, in a CoinJoin, you are reducing the deterministic link that you will have in a normal transaction into a probabilistic link that gets exponentially more complex the more round you join. But with a coin swap, you just delete the link, and atomic submarine swaps in Lightning are basically, with some caveat, the coin swaps. So Lightning is perfect for privacy. But then again, not everybody agrees. So since this is a presentation about privacy, I'm going to give you another example of somebody disagreeing on Twitter, but I will actually protect their privacy. This is another team working on another wallet, which is not Electrum. I'm going to preserve their privacy by anonymizing their wallet logo and their Twitter handle. So they're saying, Lightning is far from private. If anything, it's a privacy nightmare, and arguably already captured by regulators. Sounds like you have been misled by the traveling circus of wannabe influencers on Twitter. And he goes on like, take note, the same guys who told you Lightning is private are the same guys who push a severely flawed CoinJoin implementation Wasabi, and are the same guys who tell you that liquid is Bitcoin. Charlatans, the lots of them. And Lightning, garbage, absolutely not. So I cannot tell you who these guys are, but some people are actually hold this opinion. So there's a lot of contrast. Yesterday there was a presentation here by Carla, and she also mentioned a few new stuff in Lightning about privacy. But also, when I was watching that yesterday night, I was actually trying to understand how it's everything connected. And even if you assume that there are some privacy features going to be added, it's not trivial to understand where do they fit, how do they relate with each other. So for example, Carla mentioned the payment secrets to mitigate the problem attacks that can be added into offers and TLV. And she also mentioned, of course, the adaptation of Lightning channels to Taproot, mostly Schnorr, Musig, Musig 2, in order to have a single signature for closing. And she also mentioned route blinding. So there's a lot of stuff, but what I wanted to do was to try to put it all together into a single overview, and I will try to give you this overview right now. Of course, this talk is not really a comprehensive explanation of Lightning and privacy. There are serious resources that you can watch and read instead of my talk for that. This talk is just an attempt to just draw funny looking and aesthetically pleasing charts and arrows. You know, I mostly like to put stuff aesthetically in some symmetrical way or trilemmas and shit. So if you want serious sources about Lightning and privacy, first of all, in El Salvador, just last November, there was this talk by Bastien of Ascent, and this talk is just 30 minutes, but it's a great talk going around most of the serious things, serious consideration that you can have about Lightning and privacy. So you can find it on Adopting Bitcoin Conference YouTube channel, and you go to search for Bastien presentation. There is a follow-up to that, which is a panel hosted by Stefan Livera with Nopara, Adam Nopara, and with Open Gnomes and with Bastien again. And they go for 40 minutes elaborating even more about this relationship, which is interesting. And there is a very good article that is an article on the A Byte's Journey blog by Tony. Tony was also active on Twitter, but now he's not. By the way, you can find on his blog also a very nice blog post about why he's not on Twitter anymore, but that's a little bit off topic. And this article is great. Really, it's a very, very complete and comprehensive source about this situation. This article basically, the presentation by Bastien mostly focuses on one distinction in order to clarify things a little bit. The distinction between on-chain versus off-chain correlation. So the things in Lightning right now that let an attacker discover the correlation between a Lightning channel and a UTXO on-chain. For example, you know, the fact that the channel identifier with basically mention a UTXO, and then you have the UTXO could be of one of the two nodes, but then if they reuse the change to open another channel, you can reduce the amount of, you can basically anonymize people on-chain to off-chain. And then he also goes to analyze the off-chain to off-chain correlation, which is mostly payment correlation, so it's mostly HTLC related and stuff like that. So this is a very good distinction. And you can follow this distinction, this duality, this dualism, in order to understand some of the complicated privacy features or issues of the Lightning Network. A second key is coming. I not listed it here, but there was a good talk by Johnny Dillon in Las Vegas 2 years ago, I think, and he was actually making the point that any kind of attacker on the layer 1 will be a passive attacker. They will just sit there and eventually synchronize a node and read the open blockchain, and forever they will be able to correlate stuff and try to search for reduction of anonymity set and correlation and stuff. While in Lightning, any kind of attacker doing probing, doing civil attack with channels, they will have to be active. In the worst case scenario, just active like they have to open channels. But in the best case scenario, they will have to put a lot of liquidity at our disposal. So imagine like a typical, like a government that wants to spy a growing Lightning network, they will need a growing level of investment in actually providing liquidity for Lightning network routing. They could try to also provide fake liquidity and stuff, but basically the change in this scenario is that on one hand, you have somebody just sitting there and using all data to de-anonymize people. In this case, you have people that need to actively be involved. They need to take care to record the transaction. All the channel publication is not something that will be stored forever by your nodes. You actually have to to be there, actively listening and recording for the future. Which is, of course, it's not something that's doable, but it's increasingly expensive the more you go, and you cannot just do that it's better forward privacy because, or backward privacy actually. Another angle is the distinction made also by Bastian in his presentation between the problem of mobile Lightning Network wallets, they just want to pay and be paid, and the problem of routing Lightning Network nodes that actually want to route. The trivial example, I will get more into details, but the trivial example would be, if you just want to pay or be paid, you can probably just use private channels, and then you can try to use blinded routes, and you can try to use trampoline, and you can use a lot of stuff to actually make sure that people will not see your UTXO. But if you want to route, you have to announce something, otherwise people will not be able to find you and to route through you, and that's a problem. Also, if you want to route people, you should tell people how much feed you want, how much capacity you have, and maybe you would be even more efficient if you hint at how is your balance situation, not just the capacity, because it could be more efficient to route in some direction or the other. So there is a trade-off for routing nodes that they have to reveal stuff in order to be able to route, and yet they have to care for their privacy. Well, by final users they don't have this problem, but they have other problems. Another one is the huge asymmetry between sender and receiver. I made this point already that in general, not just for privacy, but very, very generally speaking, layer 1 is great for receivers because they just give you an address and then they go to Patagonia in a farm offline for 7 years, and then they come back and they have their payment. And the payer in the layer 1, actually being a payer is hard because you have to manage coin selection and you have trade-offs between privacy and fees, and present fees and future fees and consolidation and stuff. And then you have a problem of fee selection, and it could be too low or too high, or maybe you have to do RBF and stuff. Which is pretty hard. So on layer 1, sending is not very nice, but receiving is great. Also about privacy, like network analysis on Bitcoin. If somebody wants to triangulate your node sending out the transaction, it's hard, but they can. They can try to see where this transaction is appearing on different members. If they want to triangulate you receiving a transaction, well, good luck. Everybody will get that transaction eventually. Literally everybody. That you cannot be triangulated in any way. With Lightning is actually the other way around. Sending with Lightning, consider not just privacy but also the overall UX. It's easy. People say that Lightning is difficult, but it's not different from a prepaid card. When you have a prepaid card, you make a wire transfer, which is slow and expensive. Then you have some money, then you go online and you pay until you can actually replenish it with another slow and expensive wire transfer. With Lightning, if you want to do something similar, that's exactly the same experience, just faster than a wire transfer, and you have some chance to also be recharged at some point, refilled, which you don't have in a typical debit card. So it's fine, but if you want to receive, that's different. Now you have to open a channel, ask somebody like Thor to open a channel to you, and you need, or you have to open and swap out. You need liquidity. You need to be connected. You need. It's more challenging. Also, if you receive, you have to be more aware of the previous states. If you just spend, you don't even care about really having a watchtower. If the only thing you do is just to create a channel and spend it over, you don't even. In theory, you don't even need to actually watch the state on chain. So there is huge asymmetry. There is a asymmetry in privacy too. Most of the attacks that you can suffer on Lightning are attacks that affect the receiver more than the sender. Most trivially, the receiver has to show an invoice, and in the invoice there is your node and your private channels in order to receive the invoice. And you reuse and reuse and reuse. You may have private channels, but then you give this private channel information to one payer and the second payer and the third payer and so on and so on. And eventually you leak a lot of your privacy when you receive. While paying, that's actually better. You will have the wrench proofs, the blind signatures with Also, most of these systems, like Zcash system, like Zcash, or ring signature and CT, like Monero, they use spent transaction output sets, not unspent transaction output sets, which scale horribly, way worse than Bitcoin. So if everybody using Bitcoin were using privacy shitcoins could not actually operate at scale because they use the spent transaction output. So every time you use, but not just cryptographically, you can have obfuscation also non-cryptographically. Just like think about somebody who is doing extra on-chain hopes for privacy. You just send it to yourself with some decoy change to yourself. You are getting some privacy from chain analysis techniques, but you're spending money basically. You're spending more transaction, or you get extra inputs and extra outputs, and you do something like you avoid consolidation, you do merge avoidance. All these kind of strategies are strategies in which you put information on the blockchain, but you put even more in order to obfuscate the relevant one. The problem with this approach is that it will always be a strong trade-off with scalability and cost efficiency and time, because you need to put even more information in public consensus in global consensus in order to obfuscate the other. While Lightning is privacy by omission. You just don't put that information on the global consensus until you need it. You need to open the channel, you need to close the channel, and in between you are just omitting information from the network. Of course, you are still leaking some information, but less so than when you actually put that forever on a global consensus to be at the disposal to any passive attacker. So there are all these dualisms, and I try, and this is, so now the real presentation starts, because as I told you, just a second more. And my goal here is to put all this information into one single aesthetically pleasing, interconnected and symmetrical slide. So that was my night tonight. In order to, I had to start from a starting point. And I decided to go back to our holy texts. So in the white paper, in the on-chain one, in the layer 1 white paper, there is this chapter paragraph about privacy. And well, I read it because I'm forced to read it for religious reasons. The traditional banking model achieves a level of privacy by limiting access to information to the parties involved and the trusted third party. The necessity to announce all transactions publicly precludes these methods, but privacy can still be maintained by breaking the flow of information in other places, by keeping public keys anonymous. The public can see that someone is sending an amount to someone else, but without information linking the transaction to anyone. This is similar to the level of information released by stock exchanges, where the time and size of individual trades, the tape, is made public, but without telling who the parties were. And so he makes a nice picture. I mean, not as nice as mine, and that's what of course. But there are identities connected to transaction, connected to the trusted third party, connected to the counterparty, all separated from the public. While in Bitcoin, the transactions are available to the public, but there is a separation between the identities and the transaction. And so this is another interesting part, because as an additional firewall, a new key pair should be used for each transaction to keep them from being linked to a common owner. So avoiding address reuse was already very clear to the day one in October 2008. Some linking is still unavoidable with multi-input transactions, which necessarily reveal that their inputs were owned by the same owner. Now, I mean, Satoshi is he didn't understand back then until Greg Maxwell understood it a few months or years later, that actually the way he designed the model without any improvement was already usable for atomic trustless coin join. So multi-input in transaction which do not necessarily reveal that the inputs are owned by the same owner. So we cannot say officially that he was wrong. Let's say that he was testing us. Satoshi was testing us. The risk is that if the owner of a key is revealed, linking could reveal other transactions that belong to the same owner. So I decided to break the Bitcoin privacy leak model into two main parts. One part is between your identity, so your legal or physical or social identity, who you are, something that can be used to hurt you, to hunt you down and hurt you, and your name, which could be, a name could be an output, an address, could be also a lightning node, anything which is part of the Bitcoin system, technical system, that is actually used technically in order to prove ownership and to transmit ownership. And then the other side is the correlation between name and name. And Satoshi is basically implying already that the correlation between name and name is going to get very hard to hide, because it will be a public time chain, a public ledger. So everybody will be able to correlate name with name. But what you must avoid is to correlate your identity with the first name. And indeed, many of the talks we do about privacy and Bitcoin, both in layer 1 and layer 2, actually assume that people correlating stuff can actually always de-anonymize you. But that's not the case. The problem here is that eventually, most users tend to leak one or a few of these data points, a connection between identity, like the guys, the most famous rapper after Kanye West, the Bitfinex hacker. She basically went on a KYC exchange, and the same happened with the guy who is suspected to be the DAO. They call it hacker, but that was not a hack, because code is low, so it was the DAO lawyer. But the guy, it was not a hack. Vitalik was the hacker. He was just a lawyer. He used the code as intended to get money, to get paid by the DAO. He used and then the Ethereum guys hacked him. But anyway, these guys actually interacted with a KYC exchange, and the main point of privacy on Bitcoin, Lightning or not, would be just to avoid, first of all, KYC exchanges. That's what, basically you are, sorry, this is a little bit of the tour, but it's important. People are scared to be part of the ledger purchase list, because they enter the list, commercial list of ledger nano as purchases, and now they enter a list with their home or shipping address and name and maybe cell phone, and that was that leaked, of course, because eventually everything leaks. And that was the base for many phishing attacks and some even blackmail attacks and stuff like that. Now, every time you buy Bitcoin with KYC, you enter a list which links your name, legal documents with number of documents, a proof of residency in your home address, and on-chain addresses which amount that you withdraw. That's like the worst list ever, and that list gets shared across hundreds of people, of government agencies all around the world, and eventually gets on the darknet for, by definition, eventually, given a long enough time frame. So speak about phishing attacks or blackmail attacks or stuff like that. But anyway, most people eventually falls short here and reveal some connection between a name and this. Even if you go no KYC and you go on the street and you give some cash and you get some Bitcoin, this guy will connect some part of your identity, like your face and where you are and your Telegram handle or whatever, with one address that he paid or one invoice information. So there always is some link of that. The problem is that when you have the second kind of connection, you can use a very few data points in this kind of link in order to de-anonymize people using the second part. Basically, for example, if you have two data points of the first kind, you can use chain analysis to make very strong inferences about who is doing what on chain. So, or off chain is basically the same thing. So this is the first distinction. So how is the difference between layer 1 and layer 2? I say layer 2, I mostly mean Lightning. For the specifics of this presentation, I will talk about Lightning. But some of these things are actually similar in other kind of layer 2 solutions. So the layer 1, the first layer, Bitcoin, is very good, comparatively very good at the first kind of anonymity, avoiding a connection between identity and name. So Satoshi was right about this, at least. Because the layer one, it is asynchronous. Asynchronous means that you don't need to stay online and to talk. You don't need to coordinate online with the payer. Of course, there is some level of coordination to give an address, which can be used for privacy leaks. But once you manage to give the address, then the payment itself can happen without any kind of real-time coordination. So it really weakens timing correlation attacks or network information attacks and stuff like that. Also, it's global, just like I said before. Everybody will have the same information eventually for on-chain transaction. Everybody's mempool will actually get that information. So there is no metadata. There's no metadata tracking. Like, where is this information going? It's going everywhere, literally. So it's global and asynchronous, which is very good. Also, Bitcoin, for the characteristic of the on-chain transactions, the more block space is going to become expensive, the more people will use on-chain transaction mostly as a settlement for very huge amount or relatively huge amount that will be relatively cold. They will not. You don't want to move a lot of stuff on chain. So on chain is mostly for security, for saving, for long term, and that is good because the less you move money, the less you spend, the less you earn, the less you buy, the less you sell. The less the fewer chances you have to link your identity correlated with something. So cold money, like low velocity money that doesn't move too much, is very good for this kind of privacy. But for the very same reason, on-chain layer 1 is very bad for the other kind of correlation, because being global, everybody needs to have everything, because you need to send information to literally everybody else in order to validate it, and then you need to send them forever. It's asynchronous, so it's not something that is happening right now on the fly. They will have to maintain this information somewhere to validate the payment forever. So yeah, of course you will have pruned nodes, but somebody will have to keep the full blockchain somewhere. It's bad. Also, the fact that it's a saving technology more than a paying technology, the fact that the velocity of money is low, means that there is a very reduced anonymity set for, there is not a lot of people spending. Mostly, basically, let's say, 7 to maybe 8, 9 people spending every second. That's not a huge anonymity set per se. You cannot hide in a very large crowd of people. So very good for separating yourself from the one NIM, but very bad for avoiding the correlation across NIMs, but in this case they are just UTXOs basically, and that's the main kind of correlation. Curiously, and very luckily for my aesthetical sense, it's exactly symmetrical the other way around. So layer 2, which is a Lightning Network in this example, is a synchronous and local system of consensus, which is mostly focused on spending. So it is very good for avoiding NIM to NIM correlation, because even if there is some NIM to NIM correlation, I'm going to talk about that, but in general, it's privacy by omission. It's asynchronous, so you don't have to keep this information public forever. You can exchange it with your partner and just you can dispose it. There is a better backward privacy, because you can run a node, open a channel, pay for 1 year, close the channel, and if your attacker is going to attack you after that, he will have a hard time retrieving the old information. He must be so forward thinking to actually listen to the whole network before already in order to attack you. While in on-chain stuff, they actually just need to sync their node. And also it's local, so you are exchanging your information, you are leaking some of your information with somebody, but not with literally everybody in the system. If you're lucky enough, your counterpart is not all your counterparties are always an attacker. Not all the counterparties are always malicious. Like in global system, eventually they might, so it will be very bad. So there is this dualism here, this duality. There are some things that we can make to make it even better. Like as I said before, if you use a mobile client, the best thing you can do is to use it through Tor, so that your Lightning service provider (LSP) cannot contact your ISP in order to know basically your name and surname and address, which would be one phone call away from your IP address, is very often. Then you can use private channels. Then you can use route blinding, and then you can use trampoline nodes. I don't have the time, I think, to get into many details, but the presentation of adopting Bitcoin was really good about this, so I think it's really clear. If you have a routing node, now you have the two problems, and now for the first time I break the symmetry of my picture, which is very sad for me. I'm hurt, but I had to go there. So sorry. So now you have a problem of correlating your on-chain activity with your off-chain one, and your off-chain one with other off-chain one. So for the first one, for the correlation between your Lightning activity and your on-chain activity, there are basically three things that can help. The first one, as Carla mentioned yesterday, is taproot. Right now, when you close without taproot, you can see a 2 of 2, which is, I mean, there are some 2 of 2 services, but it's kind of fishy. And with taproot, you don't. Of course, you need to wait that enough people will use taproot addresses, otherwise your limit set is very, very low, but eventually it will become higher. Then you have dual funding. When you have dual funding, to do trivial deduction of who is funding the channel will not be trivial, because everybody could be dual funding stuff, which is great. And also there could be a lot of coin join and pay join integration. Like right now you have wallets doing coin join and wallets doing Lightning. But if you mix the stuff, you could have a wallet which is actually cooperating with your counterparty to fund a Lightning channel with a pay join, or to close it with a pay join, which is or even more complicated. With other people involved and some coordinator, you can actually have a coin join mixed there. So it could be interesting. This could also help. This is not just a way to help the second layer. Could also way to help the first layer problem further. Even if you have a validating node, you still suffer some level of UTXO correlation on chain. And you can mitigate something like, for example, with CoinJoin. But then with CoinJoin, you have something like the toxic, the toxic change at the end of the CoinJoin. I'm not sure if you are all familiar, but to CoinJoin, you have to avoid amount correlation, so you have to use fixed amount. So you mix and you mix and you mix, and then you have the change, which is too small to enter a specific amount. What do you do with that? If you keep it with the rest, you may merge it when spending again with something else, basically correlating the UTXO that you mixed with the ones that you did not mix because they were below the minimum denomination. So some people, which I will not name, are thinking, okay, we have this change. What about atomic swapping with another shitcoin with a market that will have probably a very narrow unknown set bottleneck, because you need actually a broader book of people selling and buying a shitcoin, which is shitcoin with a very low liquidity. So every privacy you are getting from the technology, you are basically losing it to the lack of liquidity, because the unknown set is reduced by 2 purchases. And so we go to the shitcoin, we do a few confidential transactions, a ring signature moves, and then we go back to Bitcoin with another atomic swap. In most cases, this will actually reduce the unknown set of your coin compared to just doing a few on-chain ops, by the way. But anyway, if you really want to swap coins, there is a great idea. Why do you want to swap Bitcoin? Why do you want to swap Satoshi with a shitcoin and back, with a lot of problems of slippage and market price? Just swap Satoshis for Satoshis. So just like Electrum wallet account, social media manager, I don't know who is said, you can actually use Lightning to manage a toxic change, of course with some caution. So it can also help layer 1 privacy. So I know this is a little bit ugly because this is asymmetrical, but maybe for the next presentation I work out some kind of, I don't know, probably we need 3D slides, anyway. Yeah, the other two things, in general, everything privacy-wise, both on-chain and off-chain, is easier for, so layer 1 is easier for the payee, for people receiving, and layer 2 is easier for the people sending. This is a very general statement. There may be counterexample, but it's a good heuristic in general. So now everything is complete. Everything I said in the previous slide is now basically. I know you don't share my excitation about this stuff, but I like to when everything goes together. A very strange story about summary swaps. Summary swap is a case of something which was not really conceived in order to help Lightning privacy, that may ended up helping with on-chain privacy, like with the example as I said before. So the idea of, instead of swapping Satoshis with shitcoins and then back, why don't you just swap Satoshis with Satoshis? That's a good idea in principle, but now we have to implement something to do in that. There is an implementation, like an experimental implementation of CoinSwap by Chris Belcher, which, somebody tried it, somebody contributed to it, but it's not really mature at all. It's not something that people could use every day, and also there is not a liquid market for people coin swapping with that implementation. So you cannot really use it to coin swap with people. But then, on Lightning, people needed atomic swap for something completely different from privacy. That was just liquidity management. People basically rushed to create the summary swap utilities and the centralized places like vaults or decentralized systems are actually being born in these months. So you have either centralized or decentralized markets to do atomic summary coin swap. Moon itself, Phoenix, Breeze, they are coin swapping. Breeze probably with vaults, but anyway, they are coin swapping basically your coins. So Lightning managed to create a functioning coin swap implementation to help liquidity problems, and now you can leverage that with some caution to actually have working coin swap implementation on chain, which is fine. It worked the incentives work the other way around. A few other things before closing. How long am I going? Probably too long, but yes, too long. Okay, a few stuff very, very quickly. Sirion, I don't know if he's here somewhere, probably he's upstairs, but anyway, interaction between Lightning Network and other kind of stuff that are not just trivial Lightning channels, like entering and exiting Xiaomi means, like Min means, or so-called side chains. I don't even like this term anymore because it's not really distinctive anymore, but anyway, entering a liquid, exiting from liquid, going into a Xiaomi mint and stuff like that. There are stuff like, for example, when you get paid with the LN URL, you are not revealing your node all the time right now. So also there's Vault 12. It's complicated, but some of this stuff can actually help the receiver not leaking a lot of stuff. There is I didn't mention rendezvous routing, which is also somehow redundant, but somehow different from the route blending. And when we will have multi-party channels, either with complicated channel factories, which are basically fractal Lightning channels, or with more trivial L2 multi-party channels, having correlating the channel with the owner of the UTXO will be way harder. Cross-input signature aggregation, I think that may be interesting because that will create, if we ever have it, a financial incentive to coinjoin. And if you have a financial incentive to coinjoin, even people closing Lightning channels will want to basically to minimize the amount of fees they pay, and so probably they may end up conjoining, not for privacy, but for fees. RGB is, I don't want to enter at length, but the idea of RGB is basically shitcoins on Lightning, but with a client-side validation model. So where you don't use the blockchain to validate stuff, but you pass over the validation state off-band, basically. This is interesting because you could create, if you create a RGB channel, there may be some Bitcoin balance, which is public, but there is also a token balance, which is not public. If you know me, you may know that I am a little bit skeptical about tokens in general. But what if we manage to have some kind of two-way pegging mechanism to create a RGB Bitcoin, two-way pegged with an on-chain Bitcoin? now you can have a Lightning channel with 0.1 Bitcoin, but with 0.7 RGB Bitcoins in the same channel, which can get interesting for privacy. And then there is the idea of pub key routing, but no, I don't know if we, instead of just, I mean, right now the ID of the channel includes the UTXO basically, the endpoint in the blockchain. You may do it differently, but I don't know if it will never be done. There's the Israeli guy proposing the ant routing, so a way of routing without routing tables, just exploring like ants. When the ants find a path, they basically have a local algorithm to find a path, which is complicated, but maybe someday, and that can improve privacy as well. So, and then there is, I was talking all the time about Tor, but Tor is not the only privacy tag. There is also the Invisible Internet Protocol, E2P, which a few Bitcoiners started to get a little bit interested because Tor has some kind of problems and shortcomings. Especially if you're more interested in hidden services than you are in going ClearNet, bridging ClearNet, then I2P may be more interesting. So if you're interested in the interplay between Lightning Network and privacy, the Wasabi wallet guys are actually putting a bounty on the head of this problem, which is a 1.11 Bitcoin grant to design a privacy-focused Lightning Network wallet. There are like simple Bitcoin wallet with the Immortal library. They're pretty much focused on privacy. So kudos to them, but it's doing a lot of stuff as well. While this is a grant for specifically privacy-oriented Lightning Network wallet design. So if you have ideas, try to play with this concept. So finally, this is challenging. I'm optimistic about privacy in both layers. I think the layers complement each other. Some things are better on chain, some things are better off chain. They are complementary. And Lightning is great, but even if Lightning fails, literally, like if the Lightning Network completely fails as an idea, still, the existence of the Lightning Network created the full Mohawk days, which created these. And so I think that's already a huge success for humankind. Really, I mean, I was so sorry not to be there yesterday. This was great. So I'm already happy, even if Lightning fails tomorrow. Okay, thank you. I don't think we have time for questions because I'm always too long, but it was great. Thanks. Or if you do have a question, just stay here and ask me.